My sister threw a cheap keychain at my face during our parents' funeral, but 5 years later, that piece of junk shut down the entire bank. I only handed it to the teller to withdraw $900 for emergency surgery. She swiped the card, and the screen flashed red. Instead of calling security on a broke girl like me, she turned pale and whispered that I needed to follow her immediately into the VIP vault. My name is Harper Rivera, and right now, I am nothing more than a shivering, waterlogged stain on the pristine marble floor of the Summit Harbor Credit Union. The Portland rain does not just fall, it attacks. It had soaked through my thin thrift store coat minutes ago, chilling me down to the bone. But the tremors rocking my body were not just from the cold. It was the throbbing, jagged pain shooting up my right arm that made my teeth chatter. My wrist was wrapped in a dirty ace bandage, stiff with dried blood and cheap ointment, a souvenir from a slip-and-fall accident at the warehouse 2 days ago. I was 31 years old, and I was terrified. I stood in line, clutching the only 2 things I had left to my name. One was a prepaid debit card, the plastic peeling at the corners, the magnetic strip worn down to a ghostly gray line. The other was a heavy, ugly, metal keychain that looked like something you would buy at a highway gas station for 99 cents. My sister, Veronica, had thrown them both at my face at our parents' funeral exactly 5 years ago. The contrast between me and the rest of the world felt violent. Everyone else in the bank looked clean. They smelled like expensive espresso, dry cleaning, and stability. I smelled like rain, damp wool, and desperation. I kept my head down, trying to hide the bandage inside my sleeve, but the red stain was seeping through the fabric. I needed $900. That was it. Not $1 million, not $10,000, just $900 to pay the deposit for the surgery, or the urgent care clinic was going to let my wrist heal wrong. If it healed wrong, I could not lift boxes. If I could not lift boxes, I could not make rent. It was a simple, terrifying equation that had been playing on a loop in my head for 48 hours. I finally reached the counter. The teller was young, with perfect winged eyeliner and a name tag that read, Jessica. She looked at me, then at the puddle forming around my worn-out sneakers, and her nose wrinkled slightly. It was a look I knew well. It was the look people gave you when they thought poverty was a contagious disease. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat and practiced. I placed the card and the keychain on the cold marble counter. The metal clattered loudly in the quiet lobby, drawing the attention of a woman in a fur coat standing 2 lines over. "I need to make a withdrawal," I said, my voice cracking with humiliation. "I do not know if the card is still active. I have not used it in 5 years." Jessica picked up the card with 2 fingers, pinching the corner as if it were a dead cockroach she had found on her kitchen floor. She flipped it over, squinting at the faded numbers. "This looks ancient," she scoffed, not bothering to lower her voice. "Summit Harbor switched to chip readers 3 years ago. I am surprised you even still have this in your wallet." "Just check it, please," I whispered, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks despite the cold. "I just need $900 for a medical bill." She sighed, a long, exaggerated exhalation of breath that screamed inconvenience. She looked at my bandaged wrist, then back at my face, her expression shifting from annoyance to pitying disdain. "If the account has been dormant for 5 years, there are probably maintenance fees that ate up whatever balance you had, honey. But sure, let me humor you." She swiped the card through the reader on her keyboard. She did it aggressively, like she wanted it to fail so she could get back to a more important customer. I held my breath. I prayed to a God I had stopped talking to when my parents died. "Please let there be $500. Please let me just pay half so they will fix my arm. I will beg for the rest." The computer let out a sound. It was not the cheerful chime of a transaction approval. It was a low, discordant buzz that seemed to vibrate through the bulletproof glass partition. Suddenly, the screen in front of Jessica flashed. I could see the reflection of it in her glasses. It was bright red, not an error message red, but a critical, pulsing alert red. The air in the bank seemed to freeze. Behind me, the security guard, a large man who had been dozing against the wall, snapped to attention. His hand drifted instinctively toward his belt, his eyes locking onto my back. Jessica's face went from annoyed to chalk white in a single second. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing. She typed something furiously, then stopped, her hands hovering over the keyboard as if it were burning hot. "Is it empty?" I asked, my stomach dropping to my knees. "Look, if there is no money, just give it back. I will leave. I am sorry to bother you." I reached for the card. I was ready to run. My mind raced with paranoia. I thought maybe Veronica had reported it stolen years ago just to spite me. I thought I was about to be arrested for trying to steal $900 with a dead piece of plastic. I could not afford a lawyer. I could not even afford a sandwich. "No!" Jessica practically shouted. She slammed her hand down on the counter, covering the card, then lowered her voice to a trembling whisper. "Do not move, ma'am. Please, just stay exactly where you are." She picked up the internal phone, her fingers shaking so badly she missed the button twice. "Mr. Henderson? You need to come out here. Now. Yes, it is a code black on Terminal 4. Code black." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the door. It was 20 feet away. Could I make it? With a bad wrist and wet shoes? Probably not. The security guard was now stepping into the middle of the lobby. Blocking the exit path, he was not looking at the other customers. He was looking at me. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. This was it. This was how it ended. Veronica had won. She had set me up 5 years ago, handing me a booby-trapped card so that if I ever tried to use it, I would go to jail. It was exactly the kind of twisted game she would play to ensure I never came back. "I did not steal it," I blurted out, my voice rising in panic. "My sister gave it to me. Please, I just wanted to pay for my arm." Jessica did not answer. She was staring at me with wide, fearful eyes, as if I had just pulled a weapon out of my pocket instead of a keychain. Then, the heavy oak door behind the counter flew open. A man in a sharp gray suit rushed out. He looked like the kind of man who ran things. Silver hair, expensive watch, serious face. This was Mr. Henderson. He looked frantic. He scanned the line, his eyes skipping over the well-dressed businessman and the lady in the fur coat. Landing squarely on me, he saw the wet hair plastered to my forehead. He saw the dirty bandage. He saw the cheap shoes that were falling apart. I braced myself for the handcuffs. I closed my eyes, waiting for him to tell the guard to drag the trash out into the rain. "Ms. Rivera?" His voice was breathless. But it was not angry. It sounded reverent. I opened my eyes. "Mr." Henderson had bypassed the secure gate and was standing right next to me in the lobby. He was ignoring the line of impatient customers. He looked at the card on the counter, then at the ugly metal keychain, and finally at my face. He looked at me like I was a ghost that had just walked out of a living will. "I am sorry," I stammered, stepping back, clutching my injured wrist to my chest. "I will go. Keep the card. I did not mean to cause trouble." "Trouble?" Mr. Henderson let out a nervous, incredulous laugh. He reached out, not to grab me, but to gently guide me away from the teller's window. "Ms. Harper Rivera, please, come with me immediately. We need to get you into the private suite." He turned to the terrified teller. "Close your station. Jessica, clear the floor." "But I just wanted $900, I whispered, confused, my adrenaline still expecting a fight. "Mr. Henderson stopped. He looked at the card in his hand, then back at me with an expression of profound pity and awe. "Miss Rivera," he said softly, leaning in so only I could hear. "The item you just handed us is not a debit card. It is a high-level authentication key." He paused, swallowing hard. "We do not keep the kind of capital this accesses in the main vault. Follow me." 5 years earlier, the air in our childhood home did not smell like safety. It smelled of aggressive, cloying lilies and the damp. rot sweet scent of old cedar that the Oregon rain had forced into the walls. It was the smell of death. But looking at my sister, you would think we were attending a coronation. We were gathered in the living room, a space that used to feel warm and cluttered but now felt strangely staged. My parents had been in the ground for less than 3 hours. The dirt was still fresh on my shoes. I was sitting on the edge of the velvet armchair, my hands gripping my knees to stop them from shaking. Across from me stood Veronica. My sister was 9 years older than me, but in that moment, the distance between us felt like a century. She was not wearing morning black. She was wearing a midnight blue designer dress that hugged her frame, and her husband, Gavin Hale, stood beside her in a suit that cost more than my car. They looked glossy. They looked impatient. They looked like they were waiting for the intermission to end so the real show could begin. Marion Kessler, the family attorney, sat at the heavy oak dining table. She looked tired. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she refused to make eye contact with me. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat, the sound cracking the tense silence like a dry twig. Regarding the primary residence located at 4210 Crestview Lane, Marion read, her voice devoid of emotion. Ownership and full management rights are hereby transferred to the eldest daughter, Veronica Hale. The words sucked the oxygen out of the room. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was not about the money. This house was where I had grown up. It was where Mom taught me to paint in the sunroom. It was where Dad and I watched old movies on rainy Sundays. Veronica had moved out 15 years ago. She hated this house. She called it a damp old shack every Thanksgiving. And regarding Harper Rivera, Marion continued, finally looking up, her eyes were unreadable, behind thick lenses. She reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out a single, thin white envelope. She slid it across the polished wood of the table. It looked pathetic sitting there, isolated and small. Your parents left you this, Marion said softly. I reached out, my fingers numb. I tore open the flap. Inside, there was no deed. There was no check for a life-changing sum. There was a plastic prepaid debit card, the kind you buy at a pharmacy shelf next to the candy bars. Along with it was a heavy, tarnished metal keychain in the shape of a generic geometric block. It looked like scrap metal. A small, yellow sticky note was attached to the card. In my mother's handwriting, it read, Balance, $500. I stared at it. $500. That was what my life was worth to them? That was the sum total of 26 years of being their daughter? A sharp, cruel laugh cut through the silence. Veronica was smiling. It was a cold, tight expression that did not reach her eyes. That seems about right, she said, stepping forward and linking her arm through Gavin's. That is your portion. Harper, don't look so shocked. You should be grateful they left you anything at all. I don't understand, I whispered, looking from the cheap plastic card to the lawyer. Marion? Why? Mom told me the house would be kept for both of us. She said that last Christmas. Plans change, Veronica interrupted, her voice dropping an octave, becoming hard and jagged. Just like family. Stop acting the victim. Harper, it is exhausted. You have been playing the helpless little girl since the day Mom and Dad brought you home. Gavin chuckled, a low, wet sound. Honey, don't waste your breath. She expected a free ride. I stood up, the envelope crinkling in my fist. I was their daughter, too. Veronica. I took care of them while you were in Europe. I drove them to chemo. I was here every single day. Veronica's face twisted. She took 2 steps toward me, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive perfume and wine. Were you? Or were you just the straggler who showed up late and stuck around hoping for a payout? Let's be honest. Harper, everyone in this room knows the truth. You were the mistake, the surprise that ruined their retirement plans. Dad used to tell me he wasn't even sure if he was your biological father. You don't have his eyes. You don't have his drive. You are just a parasite. The accusation hit me harder than a slap. That is a lie, I stammered. tears finally spilling over. "Dad never said that." "He said it to me," she hissed. "And now, he has proven it. The house is mine. The assets are mine. You got your $500. Now get out." I blinked, stunned. "What?" "I said, get out," Veronica barked. She pointed a manicured finger toward the front door. "Right now, I am changing the locks tonight. I don't want you here. I don't want your cheap clothes in my closets. I don't want your smell in my house." "My things are upstairs," I protested, panic rising in my throat. "My clothes, my laptop, the photo albums." "Everything in this house belongs to the homeowner," Gavin said, stepping in front of the staircase, blocking my path with his broad shoulders. "And that is my wife. If you take anything, we will call the police and report a theft. Do you have receipts for those clothes? Harper, can you prove you bought that laptop?" I looked at Marion. The lawyer was packing her briefcase. Her head bowed low, refusing to intervene. She was letting this happen. "You can't do this," I sobbed, the grief finally turning into terror. "It is raining." "I have nowhere to go." "Not my problem," Veronica said. She snatched the envelope from my hand. She ripped the card and the keychain out of it. "Here," she said. She drew her arm back and threw them at me. The card fluttered in the air, but the heavy metal keychain flew straight. It struck me hard on the cheekbone, a sharp, stinging impact that made me cry out. The metal clattered loudly against the hardwood floor, spinning and ringing like a death knell. "Take your trash and leave," Veronica screamed, her composure finally breaking into pure, unadulterated malice. "Get out of my house!" Gavin grabbed my arm. He was strong, too strong. He shoved me backward, forcing me toward the entryway. I stumbled, tripping over the edge of the rug. I scrambled to pick up the card and the keychain from the floor, not because I wanted them, but because they were the only things I could reach. He opened the heavy oak door. The sound of the Oregon storm roared into the quiet hallway. The wind blew rain into my face, cold and biting. "Goodbye, Harper," Gavin said, not unkindly, but with finality. He pushed me. I stumbled out onto the porch, catching myself on the railing to keep from falling down the wet stairs. I turned back, gasping, rain instantly plastering my hair to my face. Through the open door, I saw Veronica standing in the warm, golden light of the foyer. She looked like a queen surveying a peasant. She did not look sad. She looked relieved. "Don't come back," she called out over the sound of the wind. "Nobody here wants you." The heavy door slammed shut. The sound echoed in my bones. Then came the distinct, mechanical click of the deadbolt sliding home. I stood there for a long time. The porch light flickered once, then turned off, plunging me into the gray gloom of the storm. I looked down at my hands. In one palm, I held a scratched plastic card worth $500. In the other, I clutched a cold, ugly metal keychain that felt like a rock. I was 26 years old. I had no parents. I had no home. And as the rain washed the tears off my face, I realized I had no family either. I turned around and walked into the downpour, dragging my empty shadow behind me. I stood on the sidewalk for 10 minutes before my fingers could manage the dexterity required to unlock my phone screen. The rain had soaked through the pockets of my blazer, making the fabric heavy and shapeless. I did not call my aunt. I did not call the cousins who had sat in the back row of the service whispering about the buffet. I called the only person who would not tell me that everything happens for a reason. Jenna Morales picked up on the first ring. "I am at the curb." I said. My voice sounded jagged, like gravel in a blender. "I am coming," she said. She did not ask why. She did not ask where Gavin was or why I was not staying at the family estate for the wake. She just hung up and started driving. When her battered Honda Civic pulled up 15 minutes later, I got in. I dripped water all over her passenger seat. The heater was blasting, but I could not stop shivering. Jenna did not look at me with pity. She just reached over, turned the heat up to the maximum setting, and drove us away from the neighborhood where I had learned to walk. That night, I lay on her beige sofa, wrapped in 3 blankets. The apartment was small, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and burnt toast. Outside, the storm had not let up. The rain hammered against the glass window pane with a relentless, rhythmic thudding. It did not sound like weather. It sounded like a funeral drum, beating a slow march for the life I used to have. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching it spin in the shadows, waiting for the tears to come. They never did. I was too hollow for tears. I was in a state of shock so profound it felt like anesthesia. The next morning brought a gray, unforgiving light that exposed the reality of my situation. I sat up and emptied my pockets onto Jenna's coffee table. The inventory was pathetic. There was a tube of lip balm. There was my phone. The battery indicator showing a red sliver at 8%. There were 3 quarters and a dime I had found in my coat pocket. And there was the envelope. I tipped it over. The prepaid debit card slid out, followed by the heavy metal keychain. It hit the wooden table with a dull clunk. I stared at them. Balance. $500. I felt a sudden, violent surge of rage. I picked up the card. I wanted to snap it in half. I wanted to take scissors to the magnetic strip and shred it into confetti. I wanted to throw that ugly geometric metal block through the window and listen to the glass shatter. Keeping them felt like accepting the insult. It felt like agreeing with Veronica that $500 was the fair market value of my existence. My hand trembled as I bent the plastic card, but I stopped. I stopped because I had 85 cents in cash. I stopped because I had no job, no home, and no parents. Swallow your pride, a voice in my head whispered. You cannot eat pride. I slowly lowered my hands. I put the card into my wallet. Tucking it behind my driver's license where I would not have to look at it, I shoved the metal keychain into the zippered coin pocket. I would not use them, not yet, but I would keep them. I would keep them as a physical receipt of the day my sister decided I was trash. 2 days later, I tried to go back. I borrowed Jenna's car while she was at work. I told myself I just needed my clothes. I needed my birth certificate, my social security card, the photo album of my 12th birthday that I kept under my bed. I pulled into the driveway of the house on Crestview Lane. The first thing I noticed was the shine. The brass hardware on the front door was brand new. The paint around the frame was fresh. I walked up the steps, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached for my key, the one I had carried since I was 16. It slid into the lock, but it would not turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. Then I heard the whir. I looked up. A small black dome camera was mounted above the doorframe. The lens rotated mechanically, focusing directly on my face. A red light blinked. I stepped back, feeling a cold sweat break out on my neck. It had been 48 hours. She had not just changed the locks. She had fortified the perimeter. Can I help you? I spun around. Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor who had lived next door for 20 years, was standing by her hedges. She was holding a gardening shear. I had watered this woman's plants when she had hip surgery. I had walked her dog. Mrs. Higgins? I said, relieved. It is me, Harper. The key is not working. Do you know if Veronica is home? Mrs. Higgins did not smile. She looked at me with a strange, guarded expression. It was the way one looks at a solicitor or a stranger loitering in a place they do not belong. Veronica told us about the trouble, she said, her voice stiff. She said it is best if you do not disturb them. Harper, she said you need space to work through your issues. Issues? I choked out. She kicked me out. She stole the house. Mrs. Higgins took a step back, tightening her grip on the shears. There is no need to shout. It is a private family matter. You should go. She turned her back on me. I stood there, paralyzed. Veronica had not just taken the house. She had taken the narrative. She had poisoned the water before I could even take a sip. I was not the grieving daughter anymore. In the eyes of the neighborhood, I was the unstable sister who caused trouble. I realized then that Veronica did not just want me off the property. She wanted me erased. She wanted to edit me out of the family history like a smudge on a photograph. I got back in the car and drove away. I never went back for my clothes. The next few months were a blur of humiliation and survival. I could not stay on Jenna's couch forever. Her landlord had strict rules about guests, and I refused to be the reason she lost her apartment too. I started bouncing between cheap motels and the living room floors of acquaintances who let me stay for a week out of pity. I found a job washing dishes at a diner on the edge of town, then another working the night shift at a warehouse. My hands became rough and red from industrial soap. My back ached constantly. I ate instant noodles because they cost 30 cents a pack. I learned that if you drink enough water, your stomach stops growling for an hour. I learned to sleep with one eye open. My relatives called me during the first few weeks. They did not call to offer me a room. They called to manage the damage. "Harper," my aunt said over the phone, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Veronica is very upset. She says you are telling people lies. You need to let it go. Don't make a scene. It disrespects your parents' memory." "She took everything," I said, sitting on a milk crate in the back alley of the diner, smelling like grease. "She is the executor," my aunt replied sharply. "That is the law. You are young. You can work. Stop being dramatic." I stopped answering the phone after that. One night, 6 months in, I was sitting on the floor of a basement apartment I was renting illegally. It had no windows and smelled of mold. Jenna was there, sitting cross-legged opposite me. We were sharing a bottle of cheap wine. "I feel like I'm going crazy," I whispered. "Maybe they are right. Maybe I am just a loser. Maybe I deserve this." Jenna set her glass down. She grabbed my shoulders and shook me. Hard. "Listen to me," she said, her eyes fierce. "They want you to fade away. They want you to be the sad little story they tell at Thanksgiving to make themselves feel superior. Poor Harper. She just couldn't get it together. Do not give them that satisfaction." "How do I fight them?" "Jenna, I have $11 in my checking account." "You don't fight them yet," she said. "You survive them. You don't need them to believe you. You don't need the neighbors to like you. You just need to live. You stay alive. And you wait. Wheels turn. Harper, they always turn." I looked at her. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I looked tired. I looked older than 26. But I was still there. I thought about the card in my wallet with the $500 balance. I thought about the heavy metal keychain. I made a vow in the silence of that damp basement. Fine. I thought, if this is the ending you wrote for me, I accept it. You killed the daughter. You killed the sister. But you did not kill me. I would survive. I would scrub dishes until my hands bled. I would work double shifts until my legs gave out. I would eat dirt if I had to, but I would not disappear. And if the day ever came when the wheel turned, as Jenna said it would, I would be ready. I would write the sequel to this story, and I would write it in ink that they could never wash away. The first 2 years of my exile smelled like bleach and rancid fryer oil. I worked at a place called the Harbor Line Deli, which was a generous name for a grease trap near the docks that served sandwiches to truck drivers and longshoremen. My official title was dishwasher, but really, I was the chemical sponge. I spent 10 hours a day with my hands submerged in water hot enough to scald, scrubbing panic and burnt cheese off industrial pans. The industrial soap they used was cheap and caustic. It ate through the natural oils of my skin until my knuckles cracked and bled. I wrapped them in duct tape because Band-Aids were too expensive and fell off in the water anyway. I learned a new kind of mathematics during those years. It was the arithmetic of the invisible. I knew exactly how many minutes I had to work to afford a box of pasta. I knew that if I skipped lunch 3 days in a row, I could afford to run the heater in my studio apartment for 2 hours on Friday night. My apartment was a converted garage with a ceiling that leaked brown water whenever it rained, which in Portland was always. The walls were thin enough that I could hear my neighbor snoring, coughing, and arguing with the television. I did not live. I existed. I was a ghost haunting the margins of the city, keeping my head down, terrified that one wrong step, one sick day, or one broken appliance would put me on the street. By year 3, I managed to claw my way out of the kitchen and into a cubicle. I got a job as a receptionist at a firm called Northbridge Compliance Group. It sounded professional, but the pay was only $1 above minimum wage. I was the face of the company, the girl who smiled and offered water to clients who made more in an hour than I made in a month. I wore thrift store blouses that I ironed obsessively to hide the fraying seams. I sat under fluorescent lights that hummed a low, headache-inducing frequency, answering phones and filing paperwork. It was cleaner work than the deli, but the exhaustion was the same. I started taking night classes at the community college, studying for an administrative certification. I studied on the bus. I studied while eating peanut butter sandwiches in the break room. I studied until my eyes burned, driven by a singular, desperate terror of being poor forever. I wanted to build a wall of credentials between me and the street. While I was counting pennies to buy secondhand textbooks, my sister was living a very different life. I tried not to look. God knows I tried. But in the age of social media, silence requires discipline. I did not always have. I had blocked Veronica on everything, but mutual acquaintances still posted. The algorithm still suggested friends of friends, and sometimes, late at night, when the hunger in my stomach kept me awake, I would look. Veronica was not just living in our parents' house, she was erasing them from it. In the 4th year, she posted a series of photos titled Renovation Complete. I stared at the screen of my cracked phone, feeling bile rise in my throat. She had gutted the kitchen, my mother's warm, yellow-tiled kitchen, where she had taught me to bake bread, was gone. In its place was a cold, sterile operating theater of white marble and stainless steel. An island the size of a landing strip dominated the room, so blessed to finally have the dream home we deserve. The caption read, I zoomed in on the background. There was a wine fridge that cost more than my annual rent. There were light fixtures that looked like modern art sculptures. The rumors started trickling down to me through the grapevine of old neighbors who occasionally came into the office or saw me at the grocery store. They whispered that Veronica and Gavin were living large. Gavin had bought a new luxury truck, then traded it in 6 months later for a sports car. They went on vacations to Cabo and frantic shopping sprees in Seattle, but the whispers had a darker edge too. They refinanced the house. A woman from my parents' old church told me one day when I ran into her at the bus stop. She lowered her voice, scandalized, took out a massive second mortgage. Gavin told people they are leveraging the equity for investments, but I heard he's spending a lot of time at the tribal casinos. I nodded politely and looked away. I did not want to know. Hearing about it felt like watching someone skin a loved one alive. That house was the only legacy my parents had left, and Veronica was treating it like a personal ATM. She was stripping the equity, bleeding it dry to fund a lifestyle she could not actually afford. I told myself it did not matter. It was her house. The law said so. Marion Kessler had read the will. I was the mistake. She was the heir. But then came the phone call that changed the texture of my resentment. It was a rainy Tuesday in November of the 5th year. I was sitting on my bed, sewing a button back onto my work shirt, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I did not recognize. Hello? I answered, wary of debt collectors. Harper? Is that you? The voice was hushed. Familiar but distant. It was Sarah, a girl I had gone to high school with, who now worked as a paralegal in the city. We had not spoken in years. Yeah, it is me, I said, putting down the needle. Is everything okay? I probably shouldn't be calling you, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But I saw you the other day downtown, and you looked like you were carrying the world. Harper, and it made me angry. I am fine, Sarah, I said, my standard defense mechanism engaging. No, listen, she interrupted. I was at a mixer last week, a networking thing for real estate law. Your sister was there with Gavin. She was drunk, like really drunk. I stayed silent. She was bragging. Harper, she was holding court with a bunch of investors, talking about the estate. She was laughing about how everyone thought your parents were simple, honest people. Sarah paused, and I could hear her taking a breath. She said she beat the system. She said, and I quote, "The old man thought he could control me from the grave with his conditions, but I found the loophole. I got the house, I got the money, and the little brat got a piece of plastic trash." My blood ran cold. The room seemed to tilt. "What conditions?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The will gave her everything, unconditionally." "That is what she said," Sarah continued. "She said she found a loophole. She skirted the law. She said she tricked the timeline. I don't know what it means, Harper, but the way she said it, it was nasty. It sounded like she got away with murder." We hung up a minute later. I sat there in the silence of my damp room, the sound of the rain drumming against the roof. I found the loophole. I stood up and walked over to the dresser. I opened the drawer where I kept my meager valuables. I pulled out the wallet I had carried for 5 years. I dug past the library card and the bus pass until my fingers brushed the smooth, cold surface of the prepaid card. I pulled it out. The edges were worn white. The numbers were fading. Balance, $500. Then I pulled out the keychain, the ugly, heavy metal block. I turned it over in my hand. It was scratched and dull. It looked like nothing. It looked like trash. But Veronica had called it a piece of plastic trash in the same breath she mentioned a loophole. If she had to find a loophole to get the house, that meant the house was not supposed to be hers. Not fully, not freely. My parents were not cruel. They were strict. Yes, they were old-fashioned. But were they the kind of people who would leave one daughter $1 million property and the other daughter $500 and a kick in the teeth? Or was that just the story Veronica told? I looked at the keychain again. For the first time in 5 years. I did not see an insult. I saw a question mark. If she used a loophole. I whispered to the empty room, "Then what is this?" I did not have the answer. But for the first time since the funeral, the crushing weight of shame lifted just enough for curiosity to slide in. I was poor. I was tired. But I was the daughter of a man who double-checked every receipt. If there was a game being played, I had been losing because I did not know I was on the board. 2 days later, I slipped on the stairs at work and shattered my wrist. And when the hospital demanded a deposit, I did not have. I knew exactly which card I had to use. I thought I was spending my last $500. I did not know I was about to pull the thread that would unravel Veronica's entire world. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, the kind of gray, dragging midweek slump where the clock seems to move backward. I was carrying a box of archived compliance files down the back staircase of the Northbridge office building. The elevator was out of order again, and the files were heavy, smelling of dust and old toner. I was thinking about my grocery list, calculating whether I could afford fresh spinach or if I should stick to frozen peas, when the heel of my thrifted loafer caught on a loose strip of rubber tread. Gravity is a cruel master. I did not just fall. I launched. The box flew out of my hands, papers exploding into the air like confetti, and I threw my right hand out to break my fall. I landed with a sickening crunch that echoed in the narrow stairwell. For a second, there was no pain. Just a sudden, breathless shock. Then, the sensation hit me like a physical blow from a hammer. It was a white-hot, blinding bolt of agony shooting up from my wrist to my shoulder. I gasped, curling into a ball on the dirty concrete landing, clutching my arm to my chest. My vision swam with black spots. When I looked down, my wrist was sitting at an angle that nature never intended. The urgent care doctor was efficient and entirely unsympathetic. He was a young man who looked like he had not slept in 3 days. He manipulated my arm while I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste copper. "Distal radius fracture," he said, typing on his tablet without looking at me. "It is a bad one, Ms. Rivera. The bone is displaced. We can put it in a temporary splint, but you need surgery to pin it properly. If you don't, it will heal crooked. You will lose range of motion. You will have arthritis before you are 35. "Surgery," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Okay, when?" "We can schedule it for Friday," he said. But I see here you do not have private insurance. You are on the state catastrophic plan? I nodded. The deductible was astronomical. Right, he sighed. The facility requires a copay deposit before admission for the procedure, for this type of surgery, with anesthesia. The upfront cost is $900. The number hung in the air between us. $900. It might as well have been $9 million. I don't have that today, I whispered. Can I pay in installments? For the remaining balance. Yes, he said, finally looking at me with tired eyes. But the deposit is policy. We have had too many non-payments lately. I can give you some pain meds and a soft cast. But if you want to use that hand again, you need to come back with the money by Friday. I walked out of the clinic with my arm in a sling and a prescription I could not afford to fill. The pain was a dull, throbbing baseline in my head, but the panic was a high-pitched scream. When I got back to work, the humiliation continued. My manager, a man named David, who always talked about family culture while denying raise requests, looked at my sling with undisguised irritation. I can't have you at the front desk like that. Harper, he said, tapping his pen on the desk. You can't type, you can't answer the phones quickly, and honestly, the cast. It does not look professional for the client area. I can work one-handed, I pleaded. I can file, I can do data entry slowly. Liability, he said, shaking his head. If you trip again, our insurance premiums go through the roof. Take the week off, unpaid. Come back when you are cleared for light duty. I stood on the sidewalk outside the office, the rain starting to drizzle again, and felt the ground crumble beneath me. Unpaid. My rent was due in 4 days. I had exactly $112 in my checking account. The next 48 hours were a blur of frantic desperation. I went home to my damp apartment and tore it apart. I sold my microwave to a neighbor for $20. I took a bag of clothes to a consignment shop, but they only took one jacket and gave me $8 for it. I called a payday loan place, but my credit score, ruined by medical bills from when my parents got sick, was so low they laughed at me. I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by the meager inventory of my life. I was 31 years old. I worked harder than anyone I knew, and I was about to lose the use of my right hand because I could not come up with $900. The landlord, Mr. Russo, had already taped a "Notice to pay or quit" on my door that morning. He did not care about broken bones. He cared about the first of the month. I was cornered. The walls were closing in, and the water was rising. I looked at my wallet lying on the floor. It was open. Inside, tucked behind my driver's license, was the white edge of the card Veronica had thrown at me. I had not touched it in 5 years. To use it felt like admitting defeat. It felt like walking back to Veronica, getting on my knees, and saying, "You were right. I am a charity case. I am the parasite you said I was. I hated her. I hated the house she stole. I hated the luxury cars she drove while I was selling my microwave. But the pain in my wrist was becoming unbearable. My fingers were swelling, turning a terrifying shade of purple. Just survive, Jenna had told me. You don't need pride. You need to live. I reached out with my good hand. My fingers brushed the worn leather of the wallet. I pulled out the card. The plastic was scratched, the magnetic strip gray and peeling. Balance, $500. It wasn't enough. It was only $500. I would still be short, but maybe if I offered the hospital $500 cash, they would let me do a payment plan for the rest. It was my only shot. I dug into the coin pocket and pulled out the keychain. The heavy metal block sat in my palm, cold and dense. It was ugly. It was meaningless. But I grabbed it anyway, shoving it into my pocket alongside the card. Maybe I could pawn the metal for a few bucks if it was made of anything decent. I put on my coat. I wrapped a plastic grocery bag over my cast to keep it dry. I walked out into the rain. The walk to the Summit Harbor Credit Union took 20 minutes. Every step jarred my arm. The wind whipped my hair into my face. I walked past cafes where people were drinking $5 lattes. past shops selling clothes I would never wear. I felt invisible. I felt like a ghost moving through a world that had no place for me. I reached the heavy glass doors of the bank. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. I was nauseous with shame. I was about to try and use a card that was 5 years old, given to me by a sister who wished I did not exist, to pay for a body that was failing me. I took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of the rain. Just get the money, I told myself. Get the money, fix your arm, and then go back to hating them. You can't fight if you are broken. I pushed the door open and stepped into the air-conditioned silence of the lobby. I did not know it then, but I was not just walking into a bank. I was walking into the trap that had been set 5 years ago. I was stepping onto the trigger plate of a machine my parents had built in the dark, waiting for the exact moment when I would have no choice but to fall. I walked toward the counter, clutching the plastic card and the metal key, ready to beg for $500. I had no idea I was holding the detonator. The room Mr. Henderson led me into was not just an office. It was a sanctuary of silence. The heavy door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the hum of the lobby and the judgmental stares of the other customers. Here, the air was still and smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on moss, absorbing the water that was still dripping from my sneakers. Mr. Henderson gestured for me to sit in a high-backed leather chair. I sank into it, clutching my throbbing wrist to my chest. I felt small. I felt dirty. I expected the police to burst in at any second. Please, forgive the reception. Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly as he rounded his large mahogany desk. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Jessica, the teller. She did not know what she was holding. We see so few of these accounts. To be honest, I have never seen one activated in person during my 20 years here. Activated? I repeated, my voice raspy. I don't understand. I just wanted to withdraw the money. Is the card expired? If it is expired, I can go. Mr. Henderson looked at me with a profound, unsettling intensity. He placed the cheap, scratched plastic card on the center of his desk. He handled it as if it were a rare artifact, not a piece of trash my sister had thrown at my face. Ms. Rivera, he said slowly, clasping his hands together. This is not a debit card. It never was. It is a cryptographic security token disguised as a standard prepaid instrument. I stared at him. It says $500 on the back. My mother wrote it on a sticky note. That was a deterrent, he said. A camouflage. If someone had stolen your wallet, they would have seen a low-balance gift card and likely thrown it away after a failed swipe at a gas station. But when swiped here, at the issuing institution, the magnetic strip communicates a distinct protocol to our mainframe. It signals the presence of the primary beneficiary. My head was spinning. The pain in my arm was making it hard to focus. But his words were cutting through the fog. Beneficiary of what? Mr. Henderson typed something into his computer. He did not look at the screen. He looked at me. The Ravenport Settlement Trust. It is a blind trust established 7 years ago, structured to mature upon the verified death of the grantors and a subsequent dormancy period of exactly 5 years. He turned the monitor toward me. I leaned forward, squinting. I expected to see a bank statement. I expected to see numbers. I saw a wall of text, legal codes, and at the bottom, a balance figure in bold green font. I blinked. I blinked again. That is a mistake, I whispered. The number was not 500. It was not 5,000. It was a string of digits that required 2 commas to separate them. $3,450,000. Mr. Henderson read the number aloud. His voice hushed. And that is just the liquid cash component. The trust also holds deeds to a diversified portfolio of municipal bonds and a secondary property title, currently held in escrow. I felt the blood drain from my face. My good hand gripped the armrest of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. No, you have the wrong person. My parents. We were middle class. We struggled with medical bills. They didn't have $3 million. Veronica has the house. She has everything. Veronica Hale is not a named party in the Ravenport Trust, Henderson said, tapping a line on the screen. In fact, she is explicitly excluded. The trust documents state that the assets are for the sole benefit of Harper Rivera, pending a physical authentication event. He pointed to the second object I had placed on the desk, the ugly, heavy metal keychain. The card is the digital handshake, he explained, but that keychain? That is the physical key. It is made of industrial-grade tungsten. It does not open a door. Ms. Rivera. It opens safe deposit box number 401 in our subterranean vault, and it also serves as the identity verification. We have a matching laser impression of that specific key on file. Only the person holding that key can access the funds. I stared at the keychain. For 5 years, I had carried it in my pocket. I had almost thrown it in the trash a dozen times. I had thought it was a cruel joke, a piece of scrap metal to remind me I was worth nothing. Why? I choked out, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging. If they had this money, why did we live like that? Why did they let me scrub dishes for 5 years? Why did they let Veronica kick me out into the rain? Because safety required silence, a new voice said. I spun around in the chair. The heavy door to the VIP suite had opened without a sound. Standing in the doorway was a woman I had not seen since the funeral. She looked older now, her face lined with deeper creases, but her posture was as rigid as a steel beam. She was holding a thick leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to break a table. It was Marion Kessler, the family attorney, the woman who had read the will that ruined my life. She walked into the room, her heels clicking on the floor with a rhythmic precision. Mr. Henderson stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket as a sign of respect. Ms. Kessler, he said, the system notified you? The moment the card was swiped, Marion said. She did not look at him. She was looking at me. Her eyes were not cold anymore. They were filled with a strange, fierce mixture of sadness and pride. Hello, Harper, she said softly. You knew? I said, my voice rising. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like jelly. You sat at that table. You watched Veronica throw this at me. You let her call me a parasite. You let her take the house. You knew all of this, and you said nothing. I was under strict orders, Marion said, placing the briefcase on the desk next to the card. Your parents were terrified. Harper, not of poverty. They were terrified of your sister. She clicked the latches of the briefcase open. Snap, snap. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. Veronica has a gambling problem, Marion said, her voice matter-of-fact. She has had it since she was 20. Your parents spent a decade bailing her out, covering her debts, hiding her mistakes to protect the family name. When they got sick, they realized something. If they left the money to you openly, Veronica would sue you. She would drain the estate in legal fees. She would harass you, threaten you, and guilt-trip you until you gave her every cent. She is a predator. Harper. And your parents knew you were too kind to stop her. Marion pulled a thick stack of documents from the briefcase. So they built a trap, she continued. They gave her the house because they knew she would leverage it. They knew she would mortgage it to feed her addiction. They gave her the illusion of victory, and they gave you the reality of freedom, hidden inside a test. A test? I asked, looking at the money on the screen. 5 years of misery was a test? Not a test of your character, Marion corrected. A test of time. The trust had a 5-year lockout clause. It could not be accessed until 5 years after their death. They calculated that it would take Veronica exactly that long to destroy herself financially. They wanted to ensure that when you finally got this money, she would be too weak, too broke, and too legally compromised to come after it. Marion slid a piece of paper toward me. It was a letter, sealed in plastic. They bet on you. Harper, she whispered. They bet that you would be strong enough to survive the rain. And they bet that you would keep that keychain, even when you had every reason to throw it away. I looked at the card. I looked at the key. I looked at my broken wrist wrapped in a dirty bandage. I was not just a poor girl in a bank anymore. I was the daughter of two people who had played a ponky-sign, agonizing game of chess to save my life. "Mr. Henderson," Marion said, her voice sharpening back into legal precision. "Ms. Rivera needs to make an immediate withdrawal of $900 for medical services, and then, she and I have a great deal of work to do. We need to initiate the transfer of assets before the public record updates. Mr. Henderson nodded vigorously. "Of course. Immediately." I sat back in the chair, the revelation washing over me like a tidal wave. The pain in my arm was still there, but it felt distant now. I reached out and touched the cold metal of the keychain. It didn't feel like junk anymore. It felt like a weapon. "Wait," I said, my voice steady for the first time. "I don't want just 900. Marion looked at me, a small, grim smile touching her lips. "What do you want?" "Harper?" "I want to know everything," I said. "I want to know exactly what Veronica has done to my house, and then I want to know how to take it back." Marion Kessler reached into her briefcase again. This time, she did not pull out legal documents or bank statements. She pulled out a small, silver USB drive and a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. She placed them on the desk in front of me with a reverence that made the air in the room feel heavy. "Your parents gave these to me 3 days before they passed," Marion said softly. "Their instructions were explicit. I was to keep these in my personal safe. Off the firm's official logs, I was only to release them to you once the activation protocol was triggered. If you had never come in, if you had thrown that keychain away, these would have remained sealed forever." I reached for the envelope first. My hand was trembling so badly I could barely get a grip on the paper. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's script, but it was shaky. The loops of the letters jagged and uneven. It was written when the pain medication had started to lose its battle against the cancer. I tore the seal. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. "My dearest Harper." It began. "I am sorry. I am so sorry for the rain you are about to walk through. Please know that every cold night, every moment of loneliness you feel, was a brick in the wall we built to keep you safe." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and choking. I did not understand. How could leaving me destitute be a form of safety? Marion plugged the USB drive into Mr. Henderson's computer. She turned the monitor toward me and clicked a file named The Truth. The screen flickered, and then, suddenly, there they were. My breath hitched in a sob. My parents were sitting on the old beige sofa in the living room, the one Veronica had thrown out in the first month of her renovation. My father looked frail, his skin possessing a gray, papery quality. My mother was sitting next to him, holding his hand with a grip that looked painful. They looked exhausted. They looked like people who had been fighting a war in silence for decades. "Harper," my father said on the screen. His voice was raspy, but his eyes were sharp. "If you are watching this, it means it has been 5 years. It means you survived. And it means you kept the key." "We have to be quick," my mother added, glancing at the door as if she expected someone to burst in. "We do not have much time left, and we need you to understand why we did what we did. We need you to understand why we let Veronica hurt you." "Your sister is sick," my father said. He did not say it with anger. He said it with a profound, crushing resignation. "We have hidden it from you. Harper, we wanted you to have a normal childhood. So we shielded you from the truth. Veronica has been in debt since she was 22. Gambling, high-risk investments, loans from people who break legs when they do not get paid. For 10 years, we have been paying her way out. We drained our retirement accounts twice to keep her out of jail." I stared at the screen, my mouth slightly open. I had known Veronica was materialistic, but I had never known this. We knew that when we died, she would come for everything, my mother said, tears tracking down her hollow cheeks. She is desperate, Harper. And desperate people are dangerous. If we had left the money to you in a standard will, Veronica would have destroyed you. She would have sued the estate. She would have dragged you through court for years. She would have used every dirty trick, every lie, and every threat to drain your inheritance until there was nothing left but legal fees. She would have broken you, my father said firmly. And you are too good. Harper, you are too soft. You would have given her the money just to make the fighting stop, and she would have wasted it all in 6 months. I wiped my eyes with my good hand. He was right. 5 years ago, I would have handed Veronica the check just to keep the family together. So we gave her what she wanted. My father continued. We gave her the house. We gave her the status. We made her feel like the winner so she would not look for the real assets. But Harper, listen closely. We did not give her the house. We gave her a trap. Marion paused the video. This is the crucial part. Harper, listen to the legal terminology. She pressed play. The deed transfer to Veronica is not a fee simple absolute, my father said, reading from a paper in his lap. It is a conditional life estate subject to a defeasible fee. That means she owns the right to live there, but she does not own the equity unless she meets specific conditions for 5 consecutive years. She must pay all property taxes on time. My mother listed. Counting on her fingers. She must maintain the insurance, and most importantly, she is strictly prohibited from encumbering the property with debt that exceeds 40% of its original value. She cannot use the house as collateral for her gambling or her schemes. We knew she couldn't do it, my father said, a grim smile touching his lips. We gave her 5 years. We calculated that without our bailouts, her habits would consume her. We knew she would refinance. We knew she would take out second and third mortgages. Why did I have to suffer? I slept in a garage. I ate instant noodles for 5 years. I thought you hated me. As if she heard me across the chasm of death and time. My mother on the screen leaned forward. Her eyes were full of infinite sorrow. We couldn't tell you, baby, she said, her voice breaking. Because if you knew, you wouldn't have left. You would have stayed to fight her. You would have tried to save the house, and she would have pulled you down into her fire. You needed to be gone. You needed to be so poor, so invisible, that she forgot you existed. Your poverty was your camouflage. Harper, it was the only way to keep you safe until the clock ran out. We love you, my father said, his voice fading as the camera started to lose focus. We love you enough to let you hate us for a little while. Be strong, Harper, survive the rain, and when the time comes, take it all back. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of the VIP room, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. I looked at the $3 million balance on the monitor. I looked at the thick file of evidence Marion had placed on the table. For 5 years, I had thought I was a victim. I thought I was the debris left behind by a storm, but I wasn't. I was the payload. My parents hadn't cast me out. They had placed me in a bunker. They had forced me to live in the trenches so that I would be hardened enough to handle the war that was coming. The anger that had fueled me for 5 years began to cool, replacing itself with something harder, sharper. It was the cold clarity of understanding. Veronica thought she had won a kingdom. In reality, she had been squatting in a house of cards, and my parents had just handed me the fan. I looked up at Marion. My eyes were dry now. She violated the terms, I said. It was not a question. The rumors, the refinancing. She broke the 40% rule. She broke it in the 2nd year, Marion said, opening the thick file. She has refinanced the home 3 times. She currently owes the bank 120% of the home's value. She is underwater, and she is 3 years behind on property taxes. So the house is mine, I said. Technically, it has been yours since the moment she signed that first loan document, Marion corrected. But now, with the authentication token activated, we can enforce it. I stood up. My legs were steady. I picked up the heavy tungsten keychain. It felt warm in my hand now. "Okay," I said. "Let's enforce it." The first thing I did was pay the bill. I walked back into the urgent care clinic 2 hours after leaving the bank. But I walked differently. I was not slouching. I was not hiding my face. I approached the reception desk and placed a cashier's check for $9,000 on the counter. It was enough to cover the surgery, the anesthesia, the recovery room, and a generous tip for the nurse who had looked at me with kindness earlier. Though I knew hospitals did not accept tips. "Schedule me for tomorrow morning," I told the receptionist. She looked at the check, then at my wet coat, and blinked rapidly. "We have an opening at 7, she stammered. "I will be there," I said. My second move was to stabilize my perimeter. I could not fight a war from a damp garage that smelled of mold. I rented a furnished apartment in the Pearl District. It was a sterile, modern glass box on the 10th floor with a view of the rain-slicked city. It cost $3,000 a month. I paid 6 months in advance, for the first time in 5 years. I slept on sheets that did not itch, in a room that locked from the inside, but money was just fuel. I needed an architect. Marion Kessler represented the trust, and by extension, my parents' wishes. But I needed someone who represented me. I needed a shark who did not care about family sentiments. I hired Elias Vance, a property litigator with a reputation for being bloodthirsty. When I sat in his office and explained the situation, he did not offer sympathy. He smiled like a wolf spotting a limping deer. "We need a vehicle," Vance said, tapping a silver pen against his desk. "If you start buying up liens in your own name, your sister will spook. She will run or try to destroy the assets. We need to be invisible." That afternoon, we filed the paperwork for a limited liability company. I stared at the blank line where the name was supposed to go. I thought about the night I was kicked out. I thought about the 5 years of walking through storms, soaking wet, cold to the marrow. "Rainmore Holdings," I said. "Rainmore," Vance repeated, typing it in. "Sounds respectable. Sounds like old money." It sounded like survival. Once the surgery was done and the titanium pins were holding my wrist together, the real work began. I sat in Marion's office with my arm in a clean, black sling, looking at the autopsy of my sister's financial life. It was worse than my parents had predicted. "She has breached every single condition of the life estate," Marion said, sliding a spreadsheet across the mahogany table. "The terms allowed for a maximum debt-to-equity ratio of 40%. Veronica is currently leveraged at 110%. She took out a home equity line of credit to remodel the kitchen. Then she took out a secondary high-interest loan to pay off gambling debts. Then she stopped paying property taxes 18 months ago." I ran my finger down the column of red numbers. "She is drowning." "She is legally dead in the water," Marion corrected. "By violating the debt clause and failing to pay taxes. The conditional life estate is automatically terminated according to the trust's bylaws. The property rights have legally reverted to the estate." "So I can just kick her out?" I asked. "You could," Vance interjected from the corner of the room. "But if you serve an eviction notice now, she will fight. She will claim squatters' rights or file for bankruptcy to stall the process. It could take 2 years to get her out, and she might trash the house in spite." "No," I said, my voice cold. "I don't want to drag her out. I want the house to reject her." We initiated the freeze. Vance filed a lis pendens, a notice of pendency of action, against the property title at the county clerk's office. It was a public warning flag that said this property was subject to a lawsuit regarding ownership. It effectively froze the asset. Veronica could not sell it. She could not refinance it again. If she tried to run and cash out, the title company would see the flag and lock the escrow. Next, I went after the artifacts. For 5 years, Veronica had held my birth certificate, my high school diploma, and the photo albums of my childhood hostage. She had claimed they were part of the house. Vance sent a courier with a demand for return of personal property. It was not a request. It was a legal notification attached to a court order. If she refused, It would be grand larceny. 3 days later, a box arrived at my new apartment. I opened it with my good hand. It smelled of the attic. Inside were the albums. I flipped through them, seeing faces of my parents before they were sick, before they were afraid. I saw a picture of me and Veronica when we were kids. She was pushing me on a swing. She looked happy. I closed the book. That sister was dead. The woman living in my house was a stranger who owed me a life. Now for the pressure, I told Vance. We dug into the public records. The kitchen remodel Veronica had bragged about on social media? It turned out she had never paid the general contractor the final $30,000. The contractor had filed a mechanic's lien against the house. Rainmore Holdings would like to purchase that debt, I instructed Vance. We bought the contractor's lien for 90 cents on the dollar. Then we found the landscaping company she stiffed. We bought that debt too. Within 2 weeks, Rainmore Holdings was not just a shell company, it was the primary creditor for every mistake Veronica had made. I owned her bad decisions. I did not call her. I did not text her. I let the silence do the work. From my glass tower, I watched the dominoes fall. I saw the foreclosure notice from the bank get posted on the door of the house on Crestview Lane via a private investigator's photo. I knew Veronica would be panicking. She would be scrambling to find a buyer, thinking she could sell the house quick, pay off the bank, and run with the equity. But when she called a realtor, the realtor would check the title and see the list pendants. They would tell her the house was unsellable when she tried to get another loan to pay the taxes. The bank would see the liens held by Rainmore Holdings. They would deny her. I was cutting off her oxygen, room by room, dollar by dollar. It was tempting to drive past the house. It was tempting to scream at her. But I remembered my father's voice in the video. She is desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. I had to be a ghost. Ghosts cannot be bargained with. Ghosts cannot be guilt-tripped. On the final Tuesday before the foreclosure auction date, I sat in Marion's office one last time. The rain was lashing against the windows, just like it had on the day of the funeral. The bank has scheduled the auction for Monday, Marion said. Because Rainmore Holdings holds the priority liens and represents the estate which holds the reversionary interest, we have the right of first refusal. We can settle the bank's mortgage note and take full title without it ever going to public bid. Do it, I said. Pay the bank. Clear the mortgage. I want the deed in the name of the trust by Friday morning. Marion looked at me. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. You have changed. Harper, you walked in here a week ago looking for $900 and permission to exist. Now you look like a CEO. I am just following the plan, I said, adjusting my sling. They wanted me to survive. I am surviving. Marion shook her head slightly, a look of respect in her eyes. No, your parents gave you the money and the trap, but this, the strategy, the discipline, this is all you. They thought you would just get the house back. I don't think they realized you would dismantle her entire world so surgically. She gathered the papers and stood up to shake my hand. If you execute this correctly on Monday, Marion said, her voice dropping to a serious whisper that made the hair on my arms stand up. You will not just take back the house, Harper. You will take back the entire story. You will rewrite every lie she ever told about you, and you won't have to say a single word to do it. The walls of the house on Crestview Lane finally began to close in on my sister on a Thursday morning. It started with a certified letter taped to the front door by a process server who did not care about the neighborhood watch. It was a notice of default, combined with a tax foreclosure warning. The paper was bright orange. It was designed to be seen. It was designed to shame. From what my private investigator told me, the inside of the house descended into chaos within minutes. Veronica spent the morning frantically dialing every contact in her phone. She called old college friends she had not spoken to in a decade. She called the cousins who had drifted away after the funeral. She called her business partners, who were really just fellow gamblers. She was begging for a bridge loan. She needed $50,000 by Friday to stop the initial lien enforcement. But reputations have a way of traveling faster than light. Everyone knew Veronica Hale borrowed money and never paid it back. Everyone knew about her investment schemes that always ended with her asking for more cash to cover the losses. She was toxic. One by one, they hung up on her. By afternoon, the house was a war zone. My investigator sent me audio from a listening device he had planted near the back patio weeks ago. "You said you handled the property tax." Gavin's voice was a roar, distorted by rage. "You told me you paid it with the bonus check." "I had to cover the margin call on the crypto account," Veronica screamed back. "And where is your money, Gavin? You said the sports betting was a sure thing. You said we would double our investment by Christmas. You lost 40 grand in a weekend." "Because you wouldn't stop spending," he shouted. "The kitchen, the trips. You act like we are royalty. But we are broke. Veronica, we are worse than broke." I sat in my silent, high-rise apartment, listening to the recording. I drank my tea. It was Earl Grey. It tasted like justice. Desperation makes people sloppy. Around 3 in the afternoon, Veronica tried to pull the ripcord. She called a real estate agent, a high-end broker named Linda who had sold 3 houses on our street in the last year. Veronica wanted to list the house immediately. She wanted a cash buyer. Quick close. No inspections. She thought she could sell the house out from under the bank, pay off the debts, and run with whatever equity was left. But she had forgotten about Rainmore Holdings. Linda called her back 10 minutes later. I imagine Veronica was pacing the marble floor of her stolen kitchen when she took the call. "I can't list the property, Mrs. Hale," Linda said, her voice professional and icy. "I just pulled the title report. There is a lis pendens filed against the deed, and there are 3 separate liens held by a company called Rainmore Holdings. The title is frozen. You can't sell this house. You don't have the clear right to convey ownership." "Who is Rainmore Holdings?" Veronica shrieked. "I have never heard of them. This is a mistake. It is my house." "You need a lawyer, not a realtor," Linda said, and hung up. That was the moment Veronica realized the trap had snapped shut. She was cornered. She had no money, no allies, and no exit. And that was when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was a number I had blocked 5 years ago, but I had unblocked it yesterday. Knowing this moment would come, I let it ring. Once, twice, 5 times. It went to voicemail. I waited a minute, then dialed into my inbox. "Harper?" Her voice was unrecognizable. It was high, breathless, and wet with tears. "Harper, it is Ronnie. Please, pick up. Look, I know we have had our differences. I know I was hard on you at the funeral. I was grieving, okay? I wasn't myself, but we are sisters. Sisters forgive each other." She paused, sniffing loudly. "I am in a bit of a jam. Harp, just a temporary cash flow thing. I need you to sign a document. Since Mom and Dad's trust mentioned you, the bank says I might need a quitclaim deed from you to clear up a paperwork error so I can refinance. It is just a formality. If you sign it, I can give you $5,000, maybe 10. Please, Harper, call me back. Mommy and Daddy wouldn't want us to fight like this." I ended the call. She was still lying, even at the edge of the cliff. She was trying to hustle me. She didn't know about the $3 million. She didn't know I owned her debt. She just thought she could trick stupid Harper into signing away her rights one last time for a scrap of cash. I did not feel angry. I felt nothing. The sister I had loved died a long time ago. This was just a stranger trying to break into my house. By evening, the neighborhood knew. A sheriff's deputy arrived to post a formal notice of the impending auction on the front gate. Mrs. Higgins was out in her yard, watching. Other neighbors peeked through their blinds. The shiny facade of the Hale family was peeling away, revealing the rot underneath. Veronica and Gavin stayed inside with the lights off, hiding from the shame. I knew that feeling. I had stood on that porch 5 years ago while they looked at me like I was trash. Now, the view was reversed. I drove to Marion's office one last time. The city lights blurred in the rain on the window. My arm was still in the sling, but the pain was gone. Marion was waiting for me with a stack of documents. Elias Vance was there too. "The auction is canceled," Vance said, sliding a heavy document toward me. "Rainmore Holdings has exercised its right as the primary lien holder to settle the outstanding mortgage debt. We wired the payoff amount to the bank an hour ago. The bank has released their claim." "This is the deed transfer," Marion said, pointing to the signature line. "Once you sign this as the director of Rainmore Holdings, the property title reverts entirely to the Ravenport Trust, which means it reverts to you." I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name, Harper Rivera. "It is done," Marion said, closing the folder. "Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we execute the writ of possession. The sheriff will be there to escort them out." She looked at me, her eyes serious. "Harper, listen to me. Tonight, you stay away. Don't drive by. Don't answer the phone. Let them stew in the fear. When we show up tomorrow, everything needs to be locked tight. You do not reveal yourself until the sheriff has secured the premises. You are not the sister coming to visit. You are the owner coming to inspect your asset." "I understand," I said. I went back to my apartment. The city was quiet below me. I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I did not see the scared girl who had slept in a car. I did not see the dishwasher with cracked hands. I saw a woman wearing a tailored black coat that cost more than my old car. I saw eyes that had seen the bottom and climbed back up. I touched the reflection of my face. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the glass. "Tomorrow." The door on Crestview Lane would open, but it would not open for Veronica, and it would not be opened by a key that she could take away. I turned off the light and went to sleep, ready to end the story she had started 5 years ago. The next morning, the rain had finally slowed to a persistent, misty drizzle that coated the world in gray. I sat in the back of a black town car parked 3 houses down from 4210 Crestview Lane. The window was tinted, keeping me hidden in the shadows. But I could see everything. The scene on the lawn was chaotic. It looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. A sheriff's deputy was standing by the front gate, his arms crossed, watching the movers load boxes into a truck. These were not careful. White-glove movers. These were court-appointed eviction crews. And they moved with a brutal, indifferent efficiency. Veronica was standing on the porch. She was not wearing the midnight blue designer dress she had worn at the funeral. She was wearing a stained pink bathrobe, her hair a tangled mess, her face blotchy and swollen. She was screaming. "You cannot do this!" she shrieked at a man holding a clipboard. "This is my house. My parents left this to me. I am calling the police. I am calling my lawyer." "The police are already here, ma'am," the deputy said calmly, not moving from his spot. "And the eviction order comes from the court. You have been served 3 times. "It is a mistake," she wailed, grabbing the railing. "There is a mistake in the filing. Rainmore Holdings is a fraud. I don't know who they are." I tapped the driver on the shoulder. "Okay, let us go." The car rolled forward slowly, the tires crunching on the wet asphalt. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a heavy rhythmic thud, but for the first time in 5 years, it was not beating out of fear. It was beating with the adrenaline of absolute control. The car stopped right in front of the driveway. The driver stepped out and opened my door. I stepped out onto the pavement. My boots were polished leather, not the soggy sneakers I had worn for half a decade. I was wearing a tailored wool coat that shielded me from the damp air. My arm was still in the sling, but the black silk blended seamlessly with my outfit. I adjusted my sunglasses and walked toward the gate. Veronica saw the car. She saw a woman approaching. She stopped screaming at the movers and pointed a shaking finger at me. "You!" she yelled. "Are you with them? Are you the one doing this? Who the hell do you think you are? You can't just throw a family out on the street." I didn't answer. I just kept walking. I walked past the neighbors' hedges where I used to hide. I walked up the driveway where I had scraped my knee learning to ride a bike. I walked right up to the bottom of the porch steps. Veronica squinted, confused. She looked at my clothes. She looked at my hair. which was clean and styled. She did not recognize me. She was so used to seeing me as a victim, as a stain to be erased, that her brain could not process the woman standing in front of her. "I am talking to you," she snapped, trying to summon a shred of her old arrogance. "Get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." I reached up and took off my sunglasses. I looked her dead in the eye. "Hello, Veronica," I said. The color drained from her face so fast, it looked like she had been slapped by a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stumbled back, clutching the collar of her robe. "Harper?" she whispered. The word sounded like it hurt her throat. "No, that is impossible. You are broke?" I finished for her. "Pathetic? A parasite? Is that what you were going to say?" "What are you doing here?" she stammered, her eyes darting around wildly. "Did you come to gloat? Did you hear about the trouble? Look, Harper, I don't have any money to give you. Go away." Marion Kessler stepped out from behind the sheriff. She was holding the deed. "She is not here to ask for money, Mrs. Hale," Marion said, her voice cutting through the morning air like a judge's gavel. "She is here to inspect the asset." "Asset?" Veronica blinked. "The property is now owned by Rainmore Holdings," Marion announced, lifting the document so Veronica could see the stamp. "And the sole director and beneficial owner of Rainmore Holdings is Ms. Harper Rivera." Veronica froze. She looked at Marion, she looked at the house, and then she looked at me with a horror that was absolute. "You?" she choked out. "You bought my debt?" "I didn't just buy it," I said softly. "I own every lien. I own the contractor you stiffed. I own the landscaper you cheated. And because you violated the terms of Mom and Dad's trust, I own the reversionary rights. This isn't your house, Veronica. It never was. You were just a guest who overstayed her welcome." The front door opened, and Gavin came out. He was carrying 2 suitcases. He looked terrified. When he saw me, he didn't look angry. He looked like a rat looking for a hole. "Harper," he said, his voice pitching up into a nervous laugh. "Harper, thank God." "Look, you have to understand. This was all her idea. I told her not to refinance. I told her we should treat you better. She made me change the locks." Veronica whipped around, staring at her husband. "Gavin, what are you doing?" "I am leaving." "Ronnie," Gavin said, not meeting her eyes. He looked at me, putting on a pathetic, pleading smile. "Harper, surely you know I was just stuck in the middle. If you need help managing the place, I know the maintenance schedule." "Get in your car." "Gavin," I said, my voice ice cold. "If you are not off the property in 5 minutes, the sheriff will impound your vehicle." He didn't argue. He didn't look back at his wife. He ran to his sports car, threw the bags in the back, and peeled out of the driveway without a second thought. Veronica watched him go. She stood alone on the porch, surrounded by boxes of her things. The reality finally crushed her. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the wet floorboards. "Harper, please," she sobbed, reaching a hand out toward me. "He left me. Everyone left me. You can't do this. We are sisters. We are family. I am your big sister. I took care of you when you were little." "You threw a keychain at my face," I said. "I was stressed," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean it. Please, let me stay. I will stay in the guest room. I will clean. Just don't kick me out. We are blood." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes. It was the same fear I had felt for 5 years. I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered the video. I remembered my mother crying because she had to die knowing her eldest daughter was a predator. I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and held it up. The audio recording played loud and clear. It was the sound of the funeral. "That is your portion. Harper, don't look so shocked. You are just a parasite. Get out." Then the sound of the door slamming. Then the sound of the lock clicking. Veronica flinched as if I had hit her. I turned off the recording. You called me a stranger, I said, my voice steady and final. You said I was a mistake. You said I didn't belong in this family. I took a step closer, looking down at her. So today, Veronica, I am going to grant your wish. I am not your sister. I am just the landlord, and you are trespassing. I turned to the sheriff. Deputy, please remove this individual from the premises. No! Harper, no! Veronica screamed as the deputy stepped forward and firmly guided her toward the gate. She fought. She kicked. But she was powerless. I watched her being led down the driveway, past the manicured hedges, past the mailbox, and out onto the street where she had once forced me to walk. The gate clicked shut behind her. Silence descended on the yard. The movers finished loading the last box and drove away. The sheriff nodded to me and returned to his patrol car. I was alone. I walked up the steps. I stood on the porch where I had been exiled. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy tungsten keychain. It was warm from my hand. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. I pushed the door open and walked inside. The house smelled different. It smelled of cold marble and expensive cleaning products. The warmth of my parents' era was gone, buried under Veronica's sterile renovation. But as I walked through the foyer, past the grand staircase, I realized the ghosts were gone too. The fear was gone. I walked into the living room. I sat down on the floor, right where the old beige sofa used to be. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain tapping against the window. I had the money. I had the house. I had the victory. But as I sat there, I realized I didn't want to live in a museum of my trauma. I didn't want to become Veronica, hoarding wealth in a fortress. My parents had given me this money to save me. Now, I had to decide what to do with it. I opened my eyes and looked at the empty room. I am not keeping it, I whispered to the empty air. I would restore the house. Yes, I would fix what she broke. But I would not live here alone. I would turn this place into something that mattered. I would start the Rivera Foundation. I would use the $3 million to build housing and scholarships for young people who had been kicked out, for the kids who were told they were mistakes, for the ones standing in the rain with nothing but a trash bag of clothes. I would make sure that the next time a door slammed in someone's face, there would be another door waiting to open. I stood up, brushed the dust off my coat, and walked to the window to watch the clouds finally break. The sun was coming out. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from the rain to the sunlight, and I'm glad you walked it with me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your way to work, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please leave a comment down below and let me know your location, so we can see how far this story has traveled. If you enjoyed seeing justice finally served, please make sure to subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with more people who need to believe that the wheel always turns. Stay strong, and remember, you are never just part of the background.